that change itself. It's a good change for the country. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Necki Loeb, the publisher of the Union Leader in Manchester, New Hampshire.
And Pat Buchanan's presidential campaign announcement is next. This morning's announcement is being held from Manchester, New Hampshire. In 1992, Mr. Buchanan won 37% of the Republican votes in the New Hampshire primary.
I would now like to introduce to you one of the co-chairmen of the campaign, and that is Mike Hammond. Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. I'm Mike Hammond of Dunbarton. I'm here to perform two very pleasant tasks. The first is to welcome you all to the beginning of an effort which, in the end, will elect the new President of the United States. We are all here because we believe that in the end, principle will prevail. My second task, and my very great honor, is to introduce the members of the Buchanan 96 winning team. Starting from my right, appropriately, from Plymouth, the student body president of Plymouth State College and the co-chairman of Collegians for Buchanan, Mr. Chris Moran. From Plymouth, the student body vice president of Plymouth State College and the co-chairman of Collegians for Buchanan, Mr. Hap Hanman. From Kingston, the co-chairman of Pro-Lifers for Buchanan and the head of New Hampshire Concerned Women for America, Mrs. Ramel Winters. From Goffstown, the executive director of Gun Owners of New Hampshire and the head of Gun Owners for Buchanan, Mrs. Sheila Dawson. And last but not least, my own state rep, Representative Richard Kennedy. And it is now my real pleasure to introduce my co-chairman, Mr. Ward Scott.
Thank you, Mike, and it's a real pleasure working with you on this campaign. Fellow Granite Staters, fellow Americans, there comes a time in the life of every man and woman, and in the life of a nation, when it is critically important to stand up and be counted, and to define oneself in the process. A time when backroom deals, self-interest, and cold calculation must take a back seat to doing what is right and just, honorable and true. A time when what is convenient or expedient today must give way to the principles which will save our children's future. A time when lofty ideals must be given practical meaning through decisive action. It was such a time when our founding fathers pledged their sacred honor and fortune, life and limb, and any semblance of comfort to confront and defeat the most powerful empire the world had then known, and to launch our nation against all odds. And it is such a time right now. America is at a critical, defining crossroads as she prepares to enter the 21st century and the third millennium. One road marks the path of immediate convenience and short-term advantage. The other, the road less traveled, marks the path lighted by deeper understanding, principled action, higher purpose, and long-term progress. As Robert Frost wrote in his poem, The Road Not Taken, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Friends, we are here today to greet and listen to a great American who has taken the road less traveled and made a difference. A man who has always stood tall and been counted. A student of our history and our culture, who understands and lives by the bedrock of principle, values, and ideals, which has made our nation free, and who has a vision for our future and our children's future. A man of letters and a man of the people. A man who stands alone in the field as a man of proven leadership experience and decisive action as senior advisor to 3 American presidents, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and Ronald Reagan. He is a proven leader who envisions an America which is competitive in a global economy and an active neighbor among the nations of the world in a way that safeguards our interests and our national sovereignty. A leader who believes we can only have free trade if we have fair trade, and that fairness begins with the American worker and the American farmer. A leader who knows that our armed forces must always be strong, American-led, placed in harm's way only when our interests demand it, and when our men and women are given what they need, the support and the backing to get the job done with minimum loss of American life. He is a leader who always has and always will keep faith with the sons and daughters of America who serve our nation in uniform. And most of all, he is a leader who knows that the greatness of America lies in her people, in their spirit, and their initiative, flourishing in the freedom to worship their God, pursue happiness, and raise their families without the intrusion of the federal government in their daily lives. And he is a patriot who will not yield on the sanctity of human life. I am proud to stand with this patriot and ask you to join us in this journey towards an American future which is bright with promise for our children and for us all. And I promise you here today that this will be the most prolific, well-organized, grassroots campaign in New Hampshire's history that will spread like a wildfire throughout America that no organized politicians can ever stamp out. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure and high honor that I introduce to you the next President of the United States, Mr. Patrick J. Buchanan.
Excuse me. It is good to be back home again. Let me first introduce my wife, Shelley, whom you all know, and my sister, Bay. What are we doing? Calm down, everyone. Calm down. You should step back up. You should step up behind me. No need to be sorry, my friends. They're not from New Hampshire, my friends. They don't represent the people of New Hampshire. My friends, now you know, my friends, now you know what we're fighting against in this country, my friends. Let me say it again. It is good to be back home again. As you know, Shelley and I spent 10 wonderful weeks here in the winter of 1992, and we will never forget your generosity and your support when we came up here to New Hampshire and you and I stood together to say to the national establishment of both parties, turn around, you're going the wrong way. We may have lost that nomination, my friends, but you and I have won the battle for the heart and soul of the Republican Party. 4 years ago, we came here to say no to tax hikes and no to quota bills. And now every Republican says no to tax hikes and no to quota bills and no to affirmative action. So we want first to welcome the prodigal sons home to their father's house. But we shall remind them the Buchanan Brigades are not leap year conservatives. We have borne the day's heat, and we have labored in these vineyards from the very first hour. And we stand here today to resume command of the revolution that we began here 3 years ago, because we intend to lead that revolution to triumph and into the White House in 1996. But this campaign is not about yesterday. It is about tomorrow. It is about America's future. It is about taking America forward to a dream of a constitutional republic that first stirred in the hearts of the boys who stood their ground on the Lexington Green and the men who held at the Concord Bridge. This campaign is about an America that once again looks out for its own people and our own country first. 4 years ago, Three years ago, when I came to New Hampshire, I went up to the North Country on one of my first visits. And I went up to that paper mill at the James River. And it was a bad day just before Christmas. And the workers at the plant, many of them had just been laid off. And they were sullen, and they were angry, and they didn't want to talk to anyone. So as I walked down that line of workers, I will never forget, Men were sullen and angry and shook my hand and looked away. And one of them, finally with his head down, looked up and with tears in his eyes said, "Save our jobs." And I rode back down to Manchester that night, and I wondered what it was I could do for that factory worker. What are we doing, my friends, to our people? When I came back to Manchester that day, we found out that the U.S. Export-Import Bank had just issued a great big loan for a new paper mill in Mexico. What are we doing to our people? What is an economy for, if not so that workers and their families can enjoy the good life their parents knew, so that incomes rise with every year of hard work, and so that Americans once again enjoy the highest standard of living in the world? Isn't that what an economy is for? My friends, our American workers are the most productive in the world. Our technology is the finest, yet the real incomes of American workers have fallen 20% in 20 years. Why are our people not realizing the fruits of their labor? I will tell you. Because we have a government that is frozen in the ice of its own indifference. A government that does not listen anymore to the forgotten men and women of this country who work in the forges and factories and plants and businesses of this country. We have instead a government that is too busy taking the phone calls from lobbyists for foreign countries and the corporate contributions of the Fortune 500. Well, I have not forgotten that man at James River, and I have come back to give him my answer here in New Hampshire. When I am elected President of the United States, there will be no more NAFTA sellouts of American workers. There will be no more GATT deals done for the benefit of Wall Street bankers. And there will be no more $50 billion bailouts of third world socialists, whether in Moscow or Mexico City. In a Buchanan White House, foreign lobbyists and corporate contributors will not sit at the head of the table. I will. We're going to bring the jobs home, and we're going to keep America's jobs here. And when I walk into the Oval Office, we start looking out for America first. Instead of those. So to those factory workers in the North Country, and to the small businessmen and businesswomen of this country, I say to you, this campaign is about you. We are on your side. Whatever happened to the idea, friends, of one nation and one people? Whatever happened to the good old idea that all Americans of all races, colors, and creeds were men and women to whom we owed loyalty, allegiance, and love? What happened to the idea that America was a family going forward together? When I was writing my column a couple of months ago, I read a story from New York about 58 partners made at Goldman Sachs, each of whom, they were new partners, had gotten a bonus of at least $5 million that year. Fine. 1 month later, a story ran that because profits were down at Goldman Sachs, 1,000 clerical workers were being laid off. 1,000 men and women at the lowest levels at Goldman Sachs. That was a shameful act of corporate greed. But let me tell you about another story. Down in LaGrange, Georgia, I visited a textile plant there, one of the most modern in America, only the textile plant had been burned to the ground. All the employees were saved, but the factory was a total ruin. And as the factory workers came into the assembly hall of the administration building, they thought they were going to be told what all the others had been told. Now that the plant is burned, we'll be moving on to Mexico or Taiwan. But the managers of the Milliken plant came down from Spartanburg, and they said to these workers, 600 of them, "You are our family. We have suffered a loss together. Every single worker in this plant, we're going to look for a new job for you. And beyond that, we're going to build the brand new Milliken plant, the most modern in the world, right here on this site in LaGrange, Georgia. And we want our workers to join together and help us build it. And in August, it will rise again. Every one of those workers will be kept back and brought back to his old job." Isn't this the idea of free enterprise we Republicans and conservatives believe in? Isn't this the idea? Isn't that the idea and the spirit of one people working together that we must recapture? So I say to the workers and managers at that textile plant down in LaGrange, Georgia, and all the other plants and businesses, small businesses around America like that, this campaign is about you. This fight is your fight. And we Americans, must also start recapturing our lost national sovereignty. The boys and men who stood at Lexington and at that Concord Bridge, at Bunker Hill and Saratoga, they gave all they had that the land they loved would be free and independent and a sovereign nation. Yet today, our birthright of sovereignty, purchased with the blood of patriots, is being traded away for foreign money, handed over to faceless foreign bureaucrats at places like the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and the UN. Look how far we have gone. A year ago, 2 United States helicopters flying surveillance over northern Iraq were shot down by American fighter planes in a terrible incident of friendly fire. Captain Patrick McKenna of the Citadel, where I just visited, commanded one of those helicopters. Every American aboard was killed. And when the story hit the news, the Vice President, then visiting in Marrakesh at the World Trade Organization meeting, issued a statement that said, "The parents of these young men and women can be proud their sons and daughters died in the service of the United Nations." Those young men and women didn't take an oath to the United Nations. They took an oath to defend the Constitution and the country we love. And let me say to you, when Pat Buchanan gets into that Oval Office as Commander-in-Chief, no young men and women will ever be sent into battle except under American officers and to fight under an American flag. Let me say to those brave young patriots who have volunteered to serve in the armed forces of the United States to defend us, our peace and security, this campaign is about you. Look how far we have gone. Rogue nations that despise America right now are plotting to build weapons of mass destruction and to buy or build the missiles to deliver them to our country. Yet the United States of America remains naked to a missile attack. We have no defense. Why? Because a 20-year-old compact with a cheating Soviet regime that has been dead half a decade prevents us from building our missile defense. Well, that dereliction of duty ends the day I take the oath. I will maintain a military for the United States that is first on the land, first on the seas, first in the air, first in space, and I will not ask any nation's permission before I build a missile defense for the United States of America. To those Americans who have served this country in her wars, from Europe to the Pacific, from Korea to Vietnam, this campaign is about you. It is about never letting America's guard down again. What is the matter with our leaders? What is the matter with our leaders? Every year, millions of undocumented aliens break our laws, cross our borders, and demand social benefits paid for with the tax dollars of American citizens. California is being bankrupted. Texas, Florida, and Arizona are begging Washington to do its duty and defend the states as the Constitution requires. When I was in California in 1992, I spoke on this issue in San Diego. A woman came to the sheriff's office uninvited and asked if she could join me at the press conference. I said, why? She said, I had a boy, a teenage boy, who was killed in an automobile accident by drunken drivers who were on a spree, who had walked into this country, had no driver's license, and did not belong here. 3 months ago, I talked in the same city of San Diego to a young Border Patrol agent. He had been decorated as a hero. He showed me the back of his head laughing. There was scar all over it. Illegal aliens had crossed the border. He went to apprehend them, and they waited to trap him. And when he walked into their trap, they smashed his head with the back of a rock and came to kill him. And only when he took out his gun and fired in self-defense did his friends come and save his life. Yet our leaders now, timid and fearful of being called names, do nothing. Well, they have not invented the name I have not been called. So like our little visitors this morning, the custodians of political correctness do not frighten me. And I will do what is necessary to defend the borders of my country if it means putting the National Guard all along our southern frontier. So to the people of California, Florida, Texas, and Arizona being bankrupted by the cost of Washington's dereliction of duty, to that brave Border Patrol agent and the men and women who serve with him, and to that woman who lost her boy because her government would not do its duty, this campaign is about you. And as we defend our country from threats from abroad, we shall fight and win the cultural war for the soul of America, because that struggle is about who we are, what we believe, and the kind of people we shall become. And that struggle is being waged every day in every town and schoolroom of America. When you and I, many of us, were young, public schools and Catholic schools, Christian schools and Jewish schools instructed children in their religious heritage, in Judeo-Christian values, in what was right and what was wrong. We were taught about the greatness and goodness of this land we call God's country, in which we are all so fortunate to live. When I was a little boy, 3 years old, 3.5 years old, my mother's 4 brothers, one by one, came down to our house, said goodbye, and we took them to the bus station. or the train station to send them off to Europe. And we got reports from places like Anzio in Sicily. And they all came home, but in our school days, occasionally we would go out in the playground when I was 6 years old or 5 years old in first grade, and there would be a short ceremony for some fellow who did not come back from the Ardennes or Anzio or the Bulge. And that's what we were taught, and that's what we loved. But today, in too many of our schools, our children are being robbed of their innocence. Their minds are being poisoned against their Judeo-Christian heritage, against America's heroes and against American history, against the values of faith and family and country. Eternal truths that do not change from the Old and New Testament have been expelled from our public schools, and our children are being indoctrinated in moral relativism and in the propaganda of an anti-Western ideology. Parents everywhere are fighting for their children. And to the mothers and fathers waging those battles, let me say, this campaign is your campaign. Your fight, your fight, your fight is our fight, and you have my solemn word. I will shut down the U.S. Department of Education, and parental rights will prevail in our public schools again. What doth it profit a man if he gain the whole world and suffer the loss of his immortal soul? That is true also of nations. No matter how rich and prosperous we may become in material things, we cannot lose this battle for the heart and soul of America. For as de Tocqueville said long ago, America is a good country, and America is a great country because she is a good country. But if America ever ceases to be a good country, she will cease to be a great country. Yet today's American culture, movies, television, magazines, music, is polluted with lewdness and violence. Museums and art galleries welcome exhibits that mock our patriotism and our faith. Old institutions and symbols of an heroic and tragic past, from Columbus Day to the Citadel at South Carolina, which graduated Captain McKenna, from Christmas carols in public schools to Southern War memorials. They are all under assault. This campaign to malign America's heroes and defile America's past has as its end to turn America's children against what their parents believe and what we love. But because our children are our future, we can't let that happen. We can't walk away from this battle. And I pledge to you, I will use the bully pulpit of the Presidency of the United States to the full extent of my power and ability to defend American traditions and the values of faith, family, and country from any and all directions, and together we will chase the purveyors of sex and violence back beneath the rocks whence they came. So to those who want to make our country, America, the beautiful again, and I mean beautiful in every way, this campaign is about you. In the history of nations, we Americans are the Freedom Party. We are the first people, the only nation ever dedicated to the proposition that all men were created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and nothing especially not this crowd that came in earlier, nothing's going to stop us from going forward to a new era of greatness in a new century about to begin, and we can go to that era of greatness if we go forward together. So to these ends, So to these ends and for these purposes, I humbly but proudly declare my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. Thank you. Colleges, high school, New Hampshire, just like we started last time in Manchester. We did it last time, let's do it again.
Following this morning's announcement, Pat Buchanan will fly to Chicago. There, he'll speak briefly before he and his campaign staff board a Winnebago and drive to Davenport, Iowa. Tomorrow morning, the candidate will appear on ABC's Good Morning America. Later in the day, he'll make appearances in Cedar Rapids and Des Moines. This is all part of a 12-day tour that includes stops in 9 states and 14 cities. This campaign announcement re-airs tonight on C-SPAN at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 Pacific. Live today at